Thank you.
Meanwhile, King Solomon and the whole community of Israel who were assembled with him before the ark were sacrificing sheep and oxen in such abundance that they could not be numbered or counted. The priests brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place underneath the wings of the cherubim in the shrine of the house in the Holy of Holies. For the cherubim had their wings spread out over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim shielded the ark and its poles from above.
So you can see that the ark had a prominent place in the Holy of Holies underneath the cherubim. So underneath, if everyone can envision, I can show a picture of it again. Underneath the wings of the cherubim is the ark. The ark is underneath that. So you can understand what they're kind of saying, which is there's cherubim on top of the ark. Remember, there's the angels on top of the ark, but there's also angels above the ark, which now almost kind of like frames it as a holy space for God. Now, this is real important. That's the ark is there, but that's not all that's there. And again, you can see the ark is there and the poles are there, right? The poles are used to carry it.
The poles projected so that the ends of the poles were visible in the sanctuary in front of the shrine, but they could not be seen outside, and there they remain to this day.
Which seems to indicate that this was written by somebody who saw it, who knew it was there, and who did not assume that it had been destroyed. Yep.
There was nothing inside the ark but the 2 tablets of stone which Moses placed there at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after their departure from the land of Egypt.
Yep. Okay, so here it calls Mount Sinai Mount Horeb, which is the other name that's used for the same mountain. Don't worry, it's not a different mountain, at least not according to tradition, that Horeb and Sinai are synonymous. Again, it might be a difference in authorship of which name they're going to call it, but we use the terms interchangeably, Horeb and Sinai. But here it says that there's 2 tablets of stone. That's the translation that's used here. What's your translation, Mary, say? Now, in Hebrew, it says only, right? There was nothing inside, which is the word rock, only. Shnei luchot ha'avanim. There's only 2 stone tablets there. Now, I will tell you that that's not the way the rabbis understood it. They read this as the Shnei luchot ha'avanim are the 2 sets of tablets. Now, it doesn't say that here, and that's not the way it's translated either. But the rabbis understood this to teach a very important lesson, that Moses actually kept the broken tablets and the intact tablets to remind the people not to break the commandments. Now, they couldn't see it because the ark was sealed and it was not open. And you see in Raiders of the Lost Ark what happens if you open it up, right? You don't open it up. But this idea that the tablets were actually, there were 2 sets of tablets is based on this idea that, again, Moses wanted to teach a lesson. So it says Shnei luchot ha'avanim, 2 tablets of stone. Now we know that Moses came down with 2 tablets. So he only came down with 2, but is it 2 tablets or is it 2 sets of tablets? And that's the way they translated it. Shnei luchot ha'avanim. That's the Judith referenced the famous Mel Brooks scene where he drops one of the tablets. Anyways, this idea of there being the intact ones and the broken ones. Now, here's something really important that was also there. Besides the ark, there was a very important thing that was there too from our time in the desert.
When the priests came out of the sanctuary, for the cloud had filled the house of the Lord, and the priests were not able to remain and perform the service because of the cloud, for the presence of the Lord filled the house of the Lord.
Yeah, that's a real important thing. The Anan. It says the Anan was there. The Anan, that's the cloud. That's the same word that was used to describe the pillar of cloud that accompanied the Israelites, that led them during the daytime while they were in the wilderness. And of course, it's a pillar of fire at night. but the cloud is there inside the Holy of Holies. And it was so big, it was so tangible that the priests had to leave. They had to come out. And it says they were not able to remain there because of it. And that's really weird because it seems like they didn't expect it to be there. Well, at least they were there to do something and they couldn't do it. So they can't actually be there because of the presence of God that fills it. Now, we're going to get into this in a second, and the Bible itself deals with this issue. Like you're going to say, well, what is that? Like, is that God? Whatever it is, the cloud, the presence of God was in the temple, according to tradition, in this first temple. The rabbi said that in addition to the ark not being in the second temple, because we lost the ark, that's why it's lost. It was taken. We don't know for sure by who and when it didn't come back. If we did, we'd, I guess, be looking for it. But there's, the theory the Egyptians took it. There's other theories of who took it and didn't take it, didn't give it back. There's a theory that we hid it. I mean, that it was hidden by God. I mean, all of these are possibilities. But what we do know is the rabbis say that in the second temple, there was no ark and there was no cloud. And so that means that whatever was there in the second temple was not like the first temple. That God's presence was in the first temple, and they knew when they built the second temple that it was not like the first temple. They were not able to, if you will, house God in that building. And that doesn't mean that they didn't think it was holy. They did. They talk about the second temple being a holy place. But this experience of being able to see God's cloud was not there. And here's what Solomon says about this experience. These are Solomon's words, if you will, that we're going to get into.
Then Solomon declared, "The Lord has chosen to abide in a thick cloud. I have now built for you a stately house, a place where you may dwell forever."
Now that's beautiful. And that's what he says when he sees this cloud. He uses a slightly different word here. He uses the word arafel, which is not the word anan, but it's another word for it. And he also uses the word lishkon, which is the word for abide, or it's the root for, again, Shekhinah. The Shekhinah. So he says that this is something very special, that God is here in this thick cloud. So that's the way they perceived God here in this place. Now, this is not the end of Solomon's blessing. This is actually like the beginning of Solomon's blessing. This might have even been a pre-blessing of him being shocked at what he saw. Like he's just excited or surprised that this divine presence is there. He is going to right now launch into his prepared remarks, if you will. I mean, I don't know if these were prepared remarks, but they seem like prepared remarks. These are what he will tell. And again, it's a very long speech, you'll see.
Then, with the whole congregation of Israel standing, the king faced about and blessed the whole congregation of Israel. He said, "Praised be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has fulfilled with deeds the promise he made to my father David. For he said, ever since I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city among all the tribes of Israel for building a house where my name might abide, but I have chosen David to rule my people Israel."
Okay, well, he had also chosen Saul at one point, but Solomon is not concerned with that. This is, again, pay attention to what Solomon says in this speech. What levels, I would say, of propaganda exist in this speech? Because what he's saying here is not just, this is where God is, but it's because God chose my father David. And by extension, this city of Jerusalem, which is not technically in the tribe of Judah, right? It's technically in the tribe of Benjamin, but it's in the southern part of the world, of Israel. It's in the southern region, if you will. It's right on the border. And most importantly, it's the city that David has now made as the capital for the community. So he's basically saying that city that my father has now made, that I'm now building, that I've built the temple, that I'm now making sure is our capital, this is where God is. Now, if you don't think that that's a political statement, he's basically now told everybody, this is where God is. He's not in your local shrine. He's not the Danites and the Naphtalites and the Ephraimites. He's not in your backyard anymore. God's here. God's in our city. This is not just a religious statement. It's a political statement. And you can make the argument that if you read it like the way it probably was somewhat intended, Solomon is now giving you his discourse on why everyone needs to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, of all the tribes. How did that sit with people? Probably not well. Now, we assume today that this is just a beautiful speech where Solomon dedicates this place and basically makes the temple and does this great stuff for his kingdom, but it probably didn't sit well with most of Israel, which is weird because, you think that's a great thing. That's our vantage point thousands of years later. If we lived in Ephraim, if we were a Levite, for example, that was serving a shrine in the north, 100 miles away, this is ridiculous. I mean, you're listening to this and you're literally fuming as you're hearing Kings, as you get the message, as the messenger comes and gives you this speech and relays the speech to you that Solomon had just given a day or two before. By the time the message got to you, you're listening to this and you're literally going crazy. Are you kidding me? God lives there and not in our backyard? This is a problem. We don't think about it as a problem, but it was definitely a problem to over half the country that's now just been very turned off by this. And again, it's not really a great example, but it is an example of people saying, even today, for example, why should our tax dollars go to Washington, D.C.? What are you telling me, that my own situation here in California or in my backyard isn't important? Why should our tax dollars go over there? Where they're going down a black hole? It's a legitimate issue. It's a legitimate issue that people ask today. What is the purpose of all this money that's being decided on by people who live 30,000 miles away? So keep that in mind.
You're saying this is a polarizing speech.
It had to have been. It had to have been a polarizing speech. And I want you to think about it. And again, some of us are okay with an immense federal bureaucracy, and some of us are not. So some of us are going to be more or less associating with Solomon or with the other average Israelite at this moment. But think about it. Think about it from your standpoint. And if you've ever thought to yourself, yeah, that doesn't seem right. And if you live in one of those states, and you can get a map of the states that are paying more and the ones that are receiving more federal dollars, if it balances out pretty close. I mean, some people make the argument that, it's a wash, we're getting federal dollars and we're giving dollars. But if you're in a state where it's way out of whack, the bad way, you can get upset about it. So keep that in mind. That's what Solomon has just referenced. And and Solomon knows that this is probably rubbing some people the wrong way, as you're going to see.
Now, my father David had intended to build a house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, as regards your intention to build a house for my name, you did right to have that intention. However, you shall not build the house yourself. Instead, your son, the issue of your loins, shall build the house for my name.
Now that is a flat out, my dad didn't do it. That is And he's respectful about it. I mean, he's not disrespecting his dad, really, but he's basically saying that God told my dad, you're not going to do it. Your son can do it. Now, he doesn't say your son Solomon, and we could say that's because that's not what we read that God had said. God had told David that your son will build it. He didn't say your son Solomon will build it, but initially, right? So, but this is a big, pat on his back saying, I'm the one that God said was going to do it. And sure enough, I did it. My dad wanted to do it, just couldn't do it. Here, it doesn't really say why. It doesn't. Like, we don't have that, well, you have too much blood on your hands, you committed too many sins, too much warfare. We don't have all that stuff. There's no explanation given other than you had the right intention, but you're not going to do it. So it comes from other parts of the Bible. I mean, we actually read where God says you can't do it, you weren't here that. So, and here's his flat out, look at me.
And the Lord has fulfilled the promise that he made. I have succeeded my father David and have ascended the throne of Israel as the Lord promised. I have built the house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, and I have set a place there for the ark, containing the covenant which the Lord made with our fathers when he brought them out from the land of Egypt.
Yep. So there I am. I've done it. And I brought up the ark, which is why bringing up the ark is so important. This is the ark of the covenant, right? This is the law. This is actually pretty special. That what is at the center of the temple, what makes the temple special is the ark and the brit, the covenant, the 10 commandments. So what is there at the center, the treasure, if you will, is not an idol, not a statue like it would have been in every other culture. And there are statues on it. There are kruvim. There's kruvim above it and on top of it, and it's made out of gold and it's beautiful and everything else. But what's in there is a document. So it's literally like kind of what we have in our country, which is that you go to Washington, D.C. and you go to the archives. You wait in line to look at the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. You wait in line to see our covenantal documents. I don't know of many other countries that have that as their treasure, if you will. Think about it. I mean, other countries have treasures. What?
Israel has a museum with it.
Israel has a museum, which has, no, it's in Jerusalem. It's the house of the book. It's the shrine of the book. Arguably what Israel has done in Jerusalem by having the shrine of the book, having that Dead Sea Scrolls. And remember, it's not just the Dead Sea Scrolls that are there. The oldest copy of the Bible is there. The Aleppo Codex is there as well. That we have the Bible in our museum, which is right by the Supreme Court and right by the Knesset. It's a similar thing.
The Israeli documents.
The Israeli document.
State of Israel.
Yeah, it's in the Knesset.
What did we see in Torah?
We saw the Independence Hall. We saw a copy of it. There's 3 copies of it. So we do have that in Israel today. But what's interesting is that we actually have the Dead Sea Scrolls and the ancient Bible texts as our, if you will, our version of that, which again, we always take people to Shrine of the Book. We take people to the Israel Museum and spend time there. We always tell people, please come back to the Israel Museum, but we don't have 3 or 4 hours to walk through it. And it really is an amazing museum. It's Israel's Smithsonian. It's got everything in it. Modern art, ancient artifacts. It's an amazing museum. It's a beautiful museum too. But what we always take people to is the Shrine of the Book, because you can see the Dead Sea Scrolls and you can see the Aleppo Codex. You could see the books that Israel said, these books have to be protected. So if Israel is ever under attack, those things go into a vault down below. They literally go in automatically. They lower everything and it goes into a vault that protects it even from a nuclear blast. So England has the crown jewels as their national treasure. Lots of countries have things like that. We don't. We have a document like America does, and like King Solomon did, which was put the document as the holiest thing that we have. And we put that, and that's where God is in the document. So that's pretty special that if you think about it, what is it that we value? And we value this agreement, this covenant, as the treasure, as our national treasure. And even Solomon recognized that, even for the beauty of everything he created, that's what he says is what makes it the house of the Lord. So
Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of the whole community of Israel. He spread the palms of his hands towards heaven and said, O Lord, God of Israel, in the heavens above and on the earth below, there is no God like you, who keep your gracious covenant with your servants when they walk before you in wholehearted devotion. You who have kept the promises you made to your servant, my father David, fulfilling with deeds the promise you made, as is now the case. And now, O Lord God of Israel, keep the further promise that you made to your servant, my father David. Your line on the throne of Israel shall never end, if only your descendants will look to their way and walk before me as you have walked before me.
he's not done yet, by the way. He's only partway through his speech. It's very beautiful. He's saying, to God, let's make sure, you keep this promise. It definitely seems to be conditional. You have to do what you're supposed to do. You have to walk wholeheartedly with devotion. But he says to him, make sure you keep that promise you made to my dad that our line on the throne will never end. Now, again, we have to do our part. We have to walk in your way, but our dynasty will not come to an end, assuming we do that. So you can see that as much as this is a dedication of the temple, it's also an affirmation of the Davidic line. He is binding them together. He's binding God, the temple, and the Davidic line together. That's what he's talking about here. Folks, these are his words. We assume that he said this, and he's not done yet. I mean, he's got other stuff to say, but you can see what's really prime on his mind, which is make sure our dynasty does not end. Now, he will get into other stuff. I'm not saying that's all he said. That's what he said at the beginning.
Now, therefore, O God of Israel, let the promise that you made to your servant, my father David, be fulfilled. But will God really dwell on earth? Even the heavens to their uttermost reaches cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built?
Now, this is a really interesting rhetorical question, which I told you Solomon is going to ask that question. Is God really just here in this building? Now he goes, I know the universe can't even contain God. If God is beyond the universe, then how could the universe contain God? How can the uppermost reaches of heaven, right? The uttermost, how can the tops of the heavens contain God? So he says, I don't assume that this building is the only place where God is. He says that. But here's what he says.
Yet turn, O Lord my God, to the prayer and supplication of your servant, and hear the cry and prayer which your servant offers before you this day. May your eyes be open day and night towards this house, towards the place of which you have said, my name shall abide there. May you heed the prayers which your servant will offer toward this place.
Yeah. And so he says, God had said, my name shall abide there. My name, Shemi. My name will abide there. So some part of me will be there. My name will be there, which is important. And what Solomon seems to be saying is that this place in particular will be the place that God answers prayers. Because he starts off by saying, the prayer and supplication of your servant and the cry and prayer which your servant offers before you this day, that I'm praying that this place will be the place that you heed the prayers that I offer here, and then as you're going to see that other people will offer here too. So my prayer is that the prayers will be heard in this place. That this will be a place where prayers will be heard. Not that God's only in this place, but that when you pray in this place, that God will hear those prayers, answer those prayers. So what is this place? This is the place that's the direct channel to God. It's not that God doesn't exist in other places. It may not be even that God doesn't answer prayers in those places, but in this place, let God answer the prayers whenever they're asked. Yes. So this is the argument of that this is where the direct line is. This is where, the old joke where they go to the Pope and they ask him to call God and he puts in $500 and the joke is basically you come to Israel and the guy puts a dime in the you got to go back when there were coins in the phones and people paid for a call, but because people don't pay, but so that the joke is the Prime Minister of Israel puts a dime and says, well, why only a dime? It's a local call, right? That's from Israel, it's a local call. That's really kind of what Solomon is saying, that this is the local call. This is the place where the line actually goes from this place up to heaven, to God. This is the place where God hears, this is where the microphone is. This is where, like, maybe God will pick up the message somewhere else, but here in this place, God will hear it loud and clear.
In Israel, you get 6 bars.
Exactly. That's the 6 bars. That's the modern equivalent. You might get a signal somewhere else, but it's iffy. I don't have that many bars.
Right. You get an extra bar.
Yep. That's a good one. That's the modern equivalent. There's 6 bars in Israel. I told people the other day, when we were talking about Israel, and I said, the main thing I noticed in Israel was just the attitude, the feeling that things are not disastrous as we feel everywhere else. Again, I hope it stays that way in Israel. I hope it gets better in this country. But when people ask me what was the difference in this visit to Israel as opposed to previous visits, and I said, look, Israel has as many problems, if not more, than America has. Israel has COVID. They've got COVID. They're doing a pretty good job of vaccinating people, but they still have it, They've got maybe more dysfunctional political situation than we have. They're going to have their 5th election in 3 years because they can't put together a coalition that actually represents the majority of the country, which can make the argument we have too. We just don't call it that. We have 2 parties that really don't represent the majority of our citizens. But regardless, in Israel, they now have to go back to the polls right after the high holidays. They can't do them before the holidays. It's interesting. Literally in Israel, the Jewish calendar does dictate the political calendar, and they couldn't have an election until October. They're going to go back to the polls. That's pretty frustrating to have 5 elections literally in 3 or almost 4 years. 4 years. But the difference is that in Israel, the level of anger and toxicity, I couldn't feel it. Here, I feel it all the time. And it is the one main difference that I noticed in Israel. And again, I know because I go to Israel enough that I know when things are not like that there. And I do notice it was palpable and tangible. And I do have to say that was one of the strangest things, because not a lot had been done in Israel. Usually I go back, and this is the longest I've gone without going to Israel. 5 years is a real long time in my book. Usually I look around and say, oh, that's a new building. I didn't see that before. This is a new freeway. Not a lot of that. There actually was not a lot of construction or building. I was kind of surprised. But what I really did notice is the difference between the United States and Israel when it came to the level of anger and hostility and just the feeling that you can really feel, and you notice it when you're in a place that's not like that. And what the baseline is. Just like, as some of you know, I was in Croatia too. Never been there before, so I don't know what Croatia feels like normally. but I do know what Israel feels like normally, and I know what America feels like normally, and it's just a much, much different situation, and you can actually feel it. I mean, you can actually feel, it feels like it's, it's not just a breath of fresh air. It just feels less angry. So, and Israel's an angry place sometimes, by the way. I've told you, it's people, the level of, people talking nicely to each other in Israel is oftentimes you think people are arguing with each other. They're screaming at each other. It's different though. You actually know that people are not actually hating each other. So I did notice that, which is a sad commentary more on our situation than on a good commentary on Israel, maybe. But anyways, it is definitely feeling much more like it's a local call from there, just because there's less ambient noise. So what is this place? The place where my name shall abide. And he's not done.
And when you hear the supplications which your servant and your people Israel offer toward this place, give heed in your heavenly abode, give heed and pardon. Whenever one man commits an offense against another, and the latter utters an imprecation to bring a curse upon him, and comes with his imprecation before your altar in this house, oh, hear in heaven, and take action to judge your servants, condemning him who is in the wrong, and bringing down the punishment of his conduct on his head, vindicating him who is in the right, by rewarding him according to his righteousness.
Yeah. And so Solomon asks for this place to be a place where essentially justice will happen. Let people come here and offer up sacrifice.
Well, it kind of lets him off the hook, doesn't it?
It does. Because if God's doing the work, then he doesn't have to decide. But there really is this sense of like, who's better to decide this than God? And yes, you're absolutely right. There is a sense of this of like, let God deal with it, because that's what God should do. God should deal with it. But again, this is recognizing that people are turning to God in order to have these things decided, right? So he's actually asking again God to decide these things, no question. Let God do some of the work, but that's not it. So answer prayers, right? He says answer prayers, hear the supplications, give heed, give pardon. It's kind of what we talk about at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? Salachta. It's the same word there, salachta or salachti.
So if one guy comes to the temple and asks for a curse on the person who hurt him, and the other person comes there and asks to be pardoned, what happens?
Conflicting prayers. Well, according to this,
God will vindicate the right one who's in the right.
You decide how much has to come down on that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But yes, he is definitely putting some of it on God.
Should your people Israel be routed by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and then turn back to you and acknowledge your name, and they offer prayer and supplication to you in this house, oh, hear in heaven and pardon the sin of your people Israel, and restore them to the land that you gave to their fathers.
Yep. And as you can see, here's another thing I'm asking for in this place. If we suffer a military defeat, even if we deserved it, we hope that if we come back to this place and ask for forgiveness. Now, some people say this sounds like it's already happened. Maybe. I mean, it has happened in their past where they lost to the Philistines or they lost to the Canaanites, and they came and they prayed, and God heard their prayer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the big destruction had happened yet. But it could be setting that up. Look, people look for these kind of clues to see whether this was written before or after the destruction of the temple. But
maybe it's like a Leonard Cohen song and it got rewritten a zillion times.
It's possible. And I think that that's an important idea, actually. That is something that I thought of when I saw that movie, was thinking about the Bible itself and how people have probably some of the biblical authors did that, exactly that. They took parts of the Bible and they had already edited parts of it out. And then they took two different authors and wove them together, which is what happened with the Leonard Cohen song. There was I ruined the movie for it, but there was a religious version of it and a secular version of it. And through the authorship of through the editing of it, they created a new version of the song that had some of the religious elements and some of the secular elements. And that's the version that we would call the Shrek version, which is the funny thing about that song, was that it really became popular because of Shrek.
Not so. I thought about it. It's not really odd that the commercial version became the most popular.
No, other than the fact that the funny thing that they also point out, the irony of that story, is that the popular version of the song, the Rufus Wainwright version, was not sung during the movie, which happens, right? That the movie song is not the song that you actually hear on the album. It's recorded by different artists. You do that, by the way, with Prince of Egypt, with When You Believe. They have in the movie, they have, Michelle Pfeiffer and Sandra Bullock singing it. And in the recorded version that became the one that won the Oscar, they had Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. And that was the version that people would get to see or get to hear on the radio. So there's a radio version and there's the movie version. That's not uncommon. But yeah, the weird thing about it to some extent is that it was a cartoon. But of course, Shrek is not a cartoon for kids only. I mean, it definitely, kids can enjoy it, but it's a very adult cartoon and animation. And but it is interesting that the Leonard Cohen song became famous out of that, and it's a very adult song. Definitely the secular version of the song, and they talked about it in the movie, how they had to edit which parts of it that they edited out of the secular version. So but yes, and I do believe that the Bible reflects both a secular, if you will, a secular story that's a story that's not necessarily one of, that people would say, does that really belong in the Bible? I think there were other parts that were excised and we don't have, that were probably even more graphic and, would people say that shouldn't be in the Bible? But there are parts of the Bible that we look at and go, that's very human. It's not very holy, if you will. But then there was another track of the Bible, especially the author we call the P author, the priestly author, that deals with priestly issues. And then those things got woven together. And we have a version that has both secular and very religious elements to it. But yeah, it definitely happens. It definitely happens in the modern world. And I think it happened in the ancient world too. Anyways, here is, what do we have? We have the fact that people will offer their own offerings of sin, of asking for forgiveness, right? Of the chet, which is also what we talk about at high holidays, the chet, the chatat, and that people will be forgiven, both on a national level and on a personal level. So we read about individuals harming each other on a national level. If we have it, there's another thing, environmental.
Should the heavens be shut up and there be no rain because they have sinned against you? And then they prayed for this place and acknowledge your name and repent of their sins. When you answer them, oh, hear in heaven and pardon the sin of your servants, your people Israel, after you have shown them the proper way in which they are to walk, and send down rain upon the land which you gave to your people as their heritage.
Yep. Come to this place when you're not having rain. And you'll come and you'll repent. And you'll say, we screwed up somehow, which is why you must not be raining down on us some good rain. Remember, these people are completely dependent on rain. There's no rivers to speak of, a little Jordan River, but not a lot. There's not a lot of natural water. If it doesn't rain, they die. And so we pray to God, the rain will come down.
So too, if there is famine in the land, if there is pestilence, blight, mildew, locusts, or caterpillars, or if an enemy oppresses them in any of the settlements of the land, in any plague and in any disease, in any prayer or supplication offered by any person among all your people Israel, each of whom knows his own affliction, when he spreads his palms toward this house. Oh, here in your heavenly abode, and pardon and take action. Render to each man according to his ways, as you know his heart to be. For you alone know the hearts of all men, so that they may revere you all the days that they live on the land that you gave to our fathers.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful speech. And here again, not just rain. If there's a famine, or if there's illness, if there's pestilence, if there's war, that's not on a national level necessarily, but one, where one tribe or one area gets taken, did they translate as locusts and caterpillars? What does the King James say? Does it say caterpillars, locusts, or caterpillars? There you go. The deadly, deadly caterpillars. We think of you're thinking that
They're hungry.
they're hungry caterpillars. Exactly. There's a very hungry caterpillar that's going to eat up all your, it's not a funny Eric.
It's not funny if you're watching them eat your plant.
Right. It's not a funny Eric Carle book. It is a scary caterpillar locust infestation, like locusts that eat your crops. And also
gypsy moths.
yeah. And here's mildew too, which I thought was interesting. So they translated as
Mildew on your corn is really bad.
yeah, it's blight and mildew. And interestingly, these are more, I would say these words are more, they use the word dever here, which is the word we use in the 10 plagues, right? As they have pestilence. But these are definitely things that for the most part, we would say are natural occurrences, with the exception of the end, which is an enemy coming to you to attack you. Oivo, your enemies attack you. So that might again be more of a little incursion rather than a national destruction. But everything else there is natural occurrences. They're environmental catastrophe. So hopefully if they come and pray for those things, it'll be okay. And again, all the days that you live in the land that you gave our fathers. It's beautiful. Now, again, God will listen to us when we have problems between people, when we have external foes, when we have environmental catastrophes. Here's another one. If you come and pray. So again, Solomon's saying, any of these things we come to you with. Here's a weird one.
Or if a foreigner who is not of your people Israel comes from a distant land for the sake of your name, for they shall hear about your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. When he comes to pray toward this house, oh, hear in your heavenly abode, and grant all that the foreigner asks you for. Thus all the peoples of the earth will know your name and revere you, as does your people Israel. And they will recognize that your name is attached to this house that I have built.
Yeah. So if somebody from another country comes and prays here, listen to those people. It's good for our PR. It's good for your PR. If people, and they'll hear about how amazing this place is. They'll come and they'll pray here too. And you better listen to those people too, God, because that's good for everybody. It's good for you. It's good for us. The house is going to be even more well known. Did this happen? Oh, it most definitely happened. We don't know much about it happening during the time of the first temple. But we absolutely know that it happened during the time of the second temple. And there are stories of people who would come to the temple and ask for healing. They would ask for, some miracle. And if it happened, they felt that God listened to them. Needless to say, they would oftentimes attach a financial gift to that. Now, sometimes you'd say, well, you better give the financial gift up front, otherwise God's not going to listen to the prayer. But then other times, maybe people said, you know what? I paid, but God really listened to my prayer. And so I'm going to give even more. I'm going to give every year. And there are cases of that. There are cases of people that the rabbis talk about, because we have it in the rabbinic literature. We also have it in Josephus. He talks about some of the people who came there, some of the people converted. They were so taken by it. And they felt that their prayers were listened to.
Is that why some synagogues run out their sanctuaries?
I think they do it for money, but I don't think they do it for God listening to them.
I don't know.
So I will tell you that when people did it during the time, look, it goes both ways. I mean, I know people, I've heard stories about people who became Christian because they prayed to Jesus, or they had one of their Catholic friends told them that, you know, I'm going to pray to this saint for your child, and the child survives, and they believe that saint healed them. I mean, it happens. It happened. So did people do that throughout history? Probably. If you were a Jewish guy, by the way, 2,000 years ago, and you had a Greek or Roman friend who said, you know, you're doing business overseas, you know, everybody knows everybody offers up a little something to Mercury or Hermes when you do this, and you did it because, hey, everybody did it. You're supposed to do it. That's just what you do. And then if the business went well, you're in the back of your mind going, maybe I got to do that. Now, today we call that a superstition, you know, but it happens. We know it happened because the Talmud talks about it, and it says you're not supposed to do it. And it wouldn't say you're not supposed to do it unless people were doing it. And I'm talking about specifically about praying to Mercury when you did business, or you went on a journey and you started on a journey and you put a few stones out for Mercury, because that's what people did. So we know they did it. The Talmud says they did it. It makes sense that they did it because everybody did it. And you know, we have modern equivalents of it where we wouldn't say, well, that's worshiping another god, but we'd say, you know, people who do some fairly superstitious stuff because they feel like that's just what people do. You know, generally speaking, today we're a lot less superstitious than we used to be, by the way. It used to be fairly standard to engage in baseball. If you're a baseball player, you're superstitious. You're not a little stitious, you're superstitious, right? Yeah, I mean, pro athletes are well known for that. I mean, I guess if you're a soccer player and if you're in England playing football, as they say, you're also can be very superstitious. But yeah, American athletes are very superstitious, but especially baseball players. I think anything where you have time to think about it and you have time to, like, you know, you see people wear a hat, they won't take off the hat because they're, you know, they got some hits with the hat on, and then they're afraid to take off the hat. And then by the end of the season, it looks disgusting. You know,
They don't change underwear.
there's people who've done that, but there are people who do stuff where, you know, they you know, do stuff in the batter's box. They draw a little sign in the dirt, you know, whatever the thing is, you know, but we don't think about those too much today, and we don't usually ascribe them to God or to gods, but people used to do it pretty frequently. And some of the stuff got incorporated into Jewish tradition, and we didn't really think about the fact that it was originally some pagan or some weird kind of, you know, cult, you know, folk superstition, and they just became.
You know what's funny? In my family, being come here for class the past few years, is that after the funeral, or after you come back from a cemetery, you're supposed to
Wash your hands.
But that's actually in the Bible.
I mean, it's washing is not just, I mean,
It's symbolic,
yeah. But you could say that it was partly because people didn't want to bring death into the house, but it's also a matter of purification, right? It's also, the Bible talks about it as when you come into contact with the dead, you actually,
Superstition.
yeah, no, it's probably had a lot to do with the fact that People wanted to make sure they weren't carrying disease.
Right.
So there was probably a really good reason for it. I noticed that I had a funeral yesterday, unfortunately, and yesterday I noticed they did not put out a hand sanitizer after the shoveling, which they had been doing up until, I don't know, a month ago, whenever the last funeral I went to. They had hand sanitizer, which I thought was always kind of good because not everyone washes their hands after they leave a funeral. And there's a washing station right when you leave Eden or you leave Mount Sinai. There's a big water. Yeah, there's a big water fountain, big water thing right as you're going out of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is really easy to see.
Yeah.
But
I didn't realize
Eden's
that was cool.
Eden's got one. They have a little cup. They have a little cup you can fill up. But they were giving out hand sanitizer, which I thought was really good. And then I didn't say anything to him yesterday, but I'm like, bring back that hand sanitizer after you're done with the shovel. That was at Eden. But they had wipes and they had hand sanitizer up until a few weeks ago. So yeah, no, we do those kind of things, which I would say are somewhat not just superstitious, but based on the fact that people knew that you could get sick. So you pray at the temple. Other people are going to pray for the temple. We're not done with why you pray in this place. We're almost done, but we're going to read. Yeah.
Yeah, some cultures they get open.
Yeah. For healing. Yeah. Yeah. They go to places of healing. Some of those predate the Christian stuff, which they don't talk about a lot. Some of those shrines were shrines going back to pagan days, and the Christians just reincorporated them, put a saint's name on it instead of a pagan gods. But yeah, places, especially places of water, fountains and things like that, were oftentimes attached to places of healing. But yeah, people probably did it at the temple. They probably did it at the Beit HaMikdash. They went there and prayed for healing. And if they got healed, look, you're never really sure, I guess, whether it was God or whether it was the medicine or just time or good luck or whatever. But, if you come out healthy, you're like, why not, So this doesn't hurt just as a precaution. Yeah, it worked. It healed. Maybe I should keep giving money. There's people who do that.
The Pope was just at a place like that in Canada.
A pilgrimage site.
Yes. And the article, because the article mentioned that because he's so frail now, that it was especially moving to hear him speak about the care we should give to the elderly.
Yeah, the interesting thing is there's talk that he's going to retire too.
Yeah.
You're going to have two retired popes. Yeah, I know. But he thinks he's going
Then
to.
there'll be more retired popes than acting popes.
Well, yeah, but this is already unprecedented. But Benedict's still alive and kicking. That guy is
It's probably waiting for Benedict to kick the bucket.
maybe. He's like, please, I just want to retire already. Let me retire. But anyway, it's not our problem. But yeah, it's interesting. I think I know the place you're talking about in Canada where they go.
Yeah, I always forget to bring my phone in here so I can look it up.
Anyways, yeah, it's we don't have too many of them in America because we're too.
But they said there was full of canes and crutches that people had left behind.
Yep. But that's like in France, Lourdes.
Like Lourdes, yeah.
Lourdes. They come there and leave behind their walkers and everything. So yeah, we don't have too many of those places in America. Anyways, too new of a country. But there is one, and I think it's in New York, actually. It's in New York State, but yeah, it's partly because we weren't a majority Catholic country either. But I mean, the places like in Mexico, there's a place in Mexico that people go to because they had healing, whatever, fountains. All right, so here we go.
When your people take the field against their enemy by whatever way you send them, and they pray to the Lord in the direction of the city which you have chosen and of the house which I have built to your name, oh, hear in heaven their prayer and supplication and uphold their cause.
Yeah, so when you go out to battle and ahead of time, let's pray here before we go out into battle. Well, that makes sense. And even if we can't come here, let's pray in the direction of this place. That's pretty wild.
You get it now.
Yeah, but we're not usually praying for in battle,
No.
but it is interesting that it was connected to it. It was connected to it.
When they sin against you, for there is no man who does not sin, and you are angry with them and deliver them to the enemy, and their captors carry them off to an enemy land, near or far. And then they take it to heart in the land to which they have been carried off, and they repent and make supplication to you in the land of their captors, saying, we have sinned, we have acted perversely, we have acted wickedly.
Yeah, and if you think it sounds a lot like the prayer we say at
Yeah.
Ashanu,
Right.
Katanu and Rashanu, Venu. Now, again, this is not in, it's not all the Ashanus, but all these ones are part of the Ashanu, Rashanu, Hatanu. But yeah, so you can see that that's built up. So this is where people say this is written after the exile. When they sin against you and you're angry with them and you take them to an enemy that may even be, again, near or far, but it could be far away. And they repent in that land and say, we've acted wickedly. Well, here's what's going to happen.
And they turn back to you with all their heart and soul in the land of the enemies who have carried them off. And they pray to you in the direction of their land, which you gave to their fathers, of the city which you have chosen, and of the house which I have built to your name. Oh, give heed in your heavenly abode to their prayer and supplication. Uphold their cause, and pardon your people who have sinned against you for all the transgressions that they have committed against you. Grant them mercy in the sight of their captors, that they may be merciful to them.
Well, that's why, again, people say it's written afterwards. Doesn't have to be. It could have been, again, a premonition or a prediction or just the reality of what happens. But this is indeed, of course, what happens when we get taken away into Babylonian exile, is that we continue to pray towards Jerusalem. What's interesting about that
It
is
would
that-
be pretty weird to say that in a triumphal speech, though.
It's very interesting, right? Because again, this is Solomon talking about all the good things that are going to happen if you pray in this place. Now, again, it kind of saves us for the end. I'm not going to ruin it for you by telling you that this is the end of the speech. But there is this, and even in the worst case scenario, and we're not even living here anymore, we're going to pray towards it, and this is going to work. You'll be able to hear us. Now, what's interesting about this is that this assumes, though, that the building still is there. Because here it doesn't say that the temple will be destroyed. It says that it says right here, of the house which I have built to your name, which again, it doesn't say it's still standing, but it doesn't say it's not still standing. I mean, you'd think it's possible that if this was written after the destruction of the temple, that they would tip their hand and saying, even if the building's not standing anymore, we can pray towards this place. Which of course is what we did for 2,000 years after the Romans had done it. But we'd already done it during the Babylonian experience. So the fact that we did it during the last 2,000 years is, well, it's pretty amazing we're still here. But the fact that we did it, we'd already done it. We had done it after the Babylonians destroyed the temple, and we kept praying towards it. And then when the last 2,000 years, we kept praying towards it. But it doesn't say here that it's destroyed. It says the house that is the place of your name. And here it says, grant them mercy that they may be merciful to them. It doesn't say, and let them come home and build a temple again. But here's the rest of it.
For they are your very own people that you freed from Egypt, from the midst of the iron furnace. May your eyes be open to the supplication of your servant and the supplication of your people Israel, and may you heed them whenever they call upon you. For you, O Lord God, have set them apart for yourself from all the peoples of the earth as your very own, as you promised through Moses, your servant, when you freed our fathers from Egypt.
Yeah, and that's the end of the speech. Notice that he says, this goes back to Moses. This is not something I invented. This is something that you promised, and you've set us apart, and you've made us special, and you've done all these things. And, hear our prayers just like you did when you took us out of Egypt. Now, again, you're saying it's strange that this isn't a triumphal prayer, but it also is a recognition that all of these things are here, history and the future. And I would say to some extent, I don't believe that this was written after the destruction because let me rephrase that. I don't believe the temple was destroyed as somebody is writing this. Now, I will say that the Babylonians didn't just destroy the temple. They exiled people. Nebuchadnezzar exiled people before he destroyed the temple, meaning he went to war against the Jews for several years. Judah, it's not Judea yet, Judah, tribe of Judah, the kingdom of Judah. He went to war against them for a while, and he exiled people before he destroyed the temple. He actually put a Jewish governor in charge of the country to try to pacify it and to say, look, I don't need to destroy it, just behave. And they didn't behave. They said, let's get the Babylonians out of here, which is what we kind of said to the Romans. We don't need you here. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar came back and destroyed the temple. And he destroyed all the leadership there because he couldn't trust them. Did he exile all the people? Absolutely not. We know he didn't exile all the people. He didn't. He exiled the leadership, he exiled the people, and it didn't just do it once. He did it in waves. So could this have been composed during the early waves of those exiles? Yes, it's possible. But it definitely doesn't seem like the temple has been destroyed yet. So it is possible, but it also is possible that it's written by people knowing that this kind of stuff happens. Could have also been written by people who saw the northern kingdom get exiled in 722, 150 years before. Look, those are all possibilities. I'm just saying it doesn't seem like it's written by someone who's actually seen the temple be destroyed. I don't think so. There's some people who say it does. I just don't think, if you look at the other places where it's obvious that it was written after the temple was destroyed, it's pretty obvious the temple was destroyed. That people are writing backwards and imagining this. But I don't see that here. So is it possible? Yeah. But I would say that at the very latest, that this would have been written about the 600s, when the Babylonians were already a force to deal with. The Assyrians had already been a force to deal with. It, like, people knew about this stuff. But it's also possible that Solomon actually said this or something pretty close to this and said, hey, look, if we ever get in a jam, we're going to come to this place and we're going to pray to it as we're dealing with it. And if we get exiled, we're going to pray to it too. So it is possible. Some people don't like that idea and they reject any type of idea that Solomon would have said that ahead of time. I get it. So that's Solomon's very powerful prayer. That's the end of his quote.
Real quick about the stuff. You're in Australia. You face north.
Yeah.
West, I guess.
Yeah. So you don't really face east.
Right. Would it be north though too, or just?
No, it'd be northwest or whatever the direction is. Yeah. No, people in China faced the west.
Yeah.
Yeah, you face the direction. Just so happened that most Jews lived west of there and had to face towards the east.
Right.
But so Solomon finished his prayer. Here's what happened. So it's a really long prayer. I mean, that's like a 40 verse prayer. Yeah.
When Solomon finished offering to the Lord all this prayer and supplication, he rose from where he had been kneeling in front of the altar of the Lord, his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood and in a loud voice blessed the whole congregation of Israel. Praised be the Lord, who has granted a haven to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not a single word has failed of all the gracious promises that he made through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he never abandon or forsake us. May he incline our hearts to him, that we may walk in all his ways and keep the commandments, the laws, and the rules which he enjoined upon our fathers. And may these words of mine, which I have offered in supplication before the Lord, be close to the Lord our God day and night, that he may provide for his servant and for his people Israel, according to each day's needs, to the end that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord alone is God. There is no other. And may you be wholehearted with the Lord our God, to walk in his ways and keep his commandments, even as now.
So, as you can see, it's a pretty powerful speech, followed by a blessing. So he blesses them at first, right? He gave them a blessing at first. Then he launched into that long speech, which is not really, again, it's more of like a covenant, right? It's like an agreement. God, do all these things here at this place. And then he finishes with this beautiful prayer, which again goes on for 7 verses. And it begins with Baruch Adonai. It doesn't say Baruch Adonai. It says Baruch Adonai, Asher Natan Menucha, that has granted a haven, got granted a rest, sanctuary to his people Israel. And again, invoking Moses, Biad Moshe. But let's read the very end of this.
The king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. Solomon offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep as sacrifices of well-being to the Lord. Thus, the king and all the Israelites dedicated the house of the Lord. That day, the king consecrated the center of the court that was in front of the house of the Lord, for it was there that he presented the burnt offerings, the meal offerings, and the fat parts of the offerings of well-being, because the bronze altar that was before the Lord was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the meal offerings, and the fat parts of the offerings of well-being.
So they didn't make it inside the temple, which is where they normally the king would have offered up a sacrifice. Remember, there's an altar inside the building, and then there's an outer big altar on the outside, which is where the normal people would come to offer up a sacrifice. But they had to use that outside area because there was too many sacrifices for the king to offer inside. It's this huge amount of animals, 22,000 oxen. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's literally crazy. Now, again, people ate it. It's not all burnt up, but this is really a crazy amount of food.
So Solomon and all Israel with him, a great assemblage coming from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt, observed the feast at that time before the Lord our God 7 days, and again 7 days, 14 days in all. On the 8th day, he let the people go. They bade the king goodbye and went to their homes, joyful and glad of heart over all the goodness that the Lord had shown to his servant David and his people Israel.
Yeah. Now, what's weird about that, of course, is that they celebrate Sukkot on the 8th days. Here, though, it says that there were 7 days ahead of time, and again 7 days, 14 days in all. So this was like a double Sukkot. And on the 8th day, he lets them go. Let's see what the note says here of the second 7-day feast. So this is it doesn't actually say on this second set, but this is a huge holiday that everybody comes to. It says from the north all the way to the south, the Wadi of Egypt, which is the southern border of Israel. So from the furthest north to the furthest south, everybody came. And here it's going to say the Feast of Booths. Yeah, Feast of Booths. It's Sukkot, right? This is the Hag. It doesn't actually say Sukkot, but that's why it says the note that it's Hag. We already read that it's during Sukkot. So notice, by the way, it doesn't say Solomon, it says his servant David. Right? It doesn't say Solomon. Now you could say Solomon is basically saying, I'm an extension of my father here. This is always going to be known as the house of David. And that's true. We don't call it, we don't call it the house of Solomon. Some people call it Solomon's temple, but the dynasty is referred to as the house of David. And the thing is we don't call it the generations of David. We don't call it the family of David, the dynasty of David. We call it the house of David. That's what the dynasty is referred to as Beit David. Now you can make the argument, well, that's just what they call it, a house. They used to do that in Game of Thrones, right?
No, still do it. House of Windsor.
Yeah. So it's not like it's weird that they called it that. But here, there is this understanding that the house is literally the temple. When they're talking about what is the house, it's not a palace. It's the temple, is the house of David. Solomon's just made it very clear, pretty crystal clear, that this is the house of David, that this is the house that is where our authority comes from.
Those things to go back to David, you have the Star of David.
Yeah, but that's later, right? We don't call it the Star of David, but yes, it becomes David. Now, again, what Solomon did during his speech is he referred to his father, but he also referred to Moses a lot. And he does that because he knows as much as David is the foundation of the dynasty, Moses is the only authority when it comes to law. It's not his dad. You can make the argument too, his dad's not very good at following the law. He was breaking the law all the time. But Solomon knows Moses is the authority. And that's why he says, this is what we did according to Moses, right? So he says the gracious promises that he made through his servant Moses. And by the way, notice he keeps saying the word servant. He doesn't call Moses just Moses. He says your servant Moses. He says your servant David. He uses that same word, avdo. He doesn't say that these are people who are kings or rulers or anything special. He actually says that they're servants to you. What makes Moses? What makes David? What makes them great? What makes them? Because they're God's servant, not because they're gods, not because they're kings, not because they have authority unto themselves, but that they're God's servant. That's a pretty big, and again, I'm not going to say there aren't other cultures where that happened. There are versions of this in other, pagan cultures where someone says they're a servant of Zeus or they're a servant of Baal. But it is very important that's the only thing that we get here is that these people are servants of God. Now, as much as Solomon has made it very clear that the holy place and the center of his authority and everything is the temple, I will tell you, and we will read just a little bit right now, that was not the end of what Solomon built. Because as I said, this is also, and it's going to end with Solomon the builder. Because here's what it says right here.
When Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the royal palace and everything that Solomon had set his heart on constructing, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon.
So Solomon had finished building everything he wanted to build. Well, that kind of jumps the gun a little bit because we haven't really read too much about what else he built, but he built other stuff. He built his palace. He built his own royal palace. That's what it says, the Beit HaMelech. So it says, and it's prettier in Hebrew, because it says he built the Beit Adonai. He built the house of God, and he built the Beit HaMelech. He built the house of the king. And then it says, in everything that he had set his heart upon.
Who did all this building?
He did this building. Now, we haven't really read what he's done besides building the temple, but we will. And we'll see how much of it we read today. So God comes to him, just like he came to him at the beginning of his reign, when God came to Solomon and said, "What do you want, Solomon? I'll give you anything you want," like the genie, right? And Solomon said, "Give me wisdom, give me discernment so that I can know your ways." And God says, "Right answer. You asked for the right thing. You didn't ask for riches. You didn't ask for power. I'm going to give all of that to you too, because you asked for the right thing. You asked for wisdom. You wanted to know how to be a good king." So here's what God says the second time he comes to Solomon.
The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and the supplication which you have offered to me. I consecrate this house which you have built, and I set my name there forever. My eyes and my heart shall ever be there. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked before me, wholeheartedly and with uprightness, doing all that I have commanded you, and keeping my laws and my rules, then I will establish your throne of kingship over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, saying, your line on the throne of Israel shall never end.
Yeah, that's really nice. God says, I've heard all your prayers and you're doing right. And as long as you keep doing right, like your father David did, which is interesting because your father David really didn't always do right. Let's face it. Father David killed people who were innocent, took people's wives, did stuff like that wasn't always upright. But what's interesting about David is David also admits when he makes a mistake. And it doesn't say that David is perfect. It says that he's wholehearted and he's trying to do his best. To some extent, he's upright. Now, again, it's difficult to say, when we read all the bad things that he did, to say that. But clearly, God feels, Solomon hears this message that he tried his best. And maybe again, the things that we see that David do, that he admits that he did, that the Bible tells us he did, that, as I've made many times the point, he allowed that story to be told. Didn't have to let that story be told. He let that story be told. He definitely let the story be told.
But it also mentioned earlier, we read that everybody said,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, he actually said it in this portion. And he says to him, your father overall was guided by these rules, right? I mean, that's what maybe it's my spin on it. But he says, if you do this, I will keep this agreement. I'll protect your throne, and it'll also be in line. It'll be for your children as well. But, and here's the but.
But if you and your descendants turn away from me and do not keep the commandments and the laws which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will sweep Israel off the land which I gave them. I will reject the house which I have consecrated to my name, and Israel shall become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And as for this house, once so exalted, everyone passing by it shall be appalled and shall hiss. And when they ask, why did the Lord do thus to the land and to this house? They shall be told, it is because they forsook the Lord their God who freed them from the land of Egypt, and they embraced other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore, the Lord has brought all this calamity upon them.
And so what's interesting, and this is where we're going to finish today. God gives Solomon a message as soon as this building is done, that if you don't follow the rules, this building's done. Yeah, it's beautiful. You did a beautiful job. I'm here. I bless it. I agree with everything you say. You'll be able to stay, but I also have no issue telling you that this house will be destroyed if you don't follow the rules. Now, again, this is where people say that it was written after it actually happened. That this is not a prediction, but this is a statement of what happened. But what's interesting about it is that it is put here. After this beautiful description of the temple, the beautiful description of its dedication, the amazing amount of sacrifices that were made there, that God literally says, yeah, it's beautiful. But if you screw up, I have no issue having it be destroyed. I'm not going to let this temple exist for people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, which of course here is worshiping other gods. That they have abandoned me and they're saying, well, we still have the building, but you're not worshiping God anymore. So that is the message that God gives them, which is beautiful. It doesn't mean anything if you don't follow the rules. So it's a really powerful lesson. And one of the things you can make the argument is what makes the Torah different, what makes the temple different, what made the Jewish people different than other nations where they built a beautiful temple. And when it got destroyed, their religion was over. When it got destroyed, if there were ruins, sometimes people would say, you know what, this is a pretty nice building. Let's worship our God here now. They did a really good job building this basilica. Let's turn it into a church. Let's actually call the church a basilica. It's not a church. Basilica is literally a Roman civic center. It's not a church. A basilica, originally, these were Roman buildings that the Romans would have their city council meetings in. They got turned into churches because the Christians said, these are really good buildings for us to have our church services in. But a basilica has nothing to do with the church. It's nothing to do with God. The word literally means the place of the king, of the ruler. Now, again, well, our ruler's God. Well, fine, but that's not what the original construction of the buildings was for. So we had a different thing. Temple was destroyed. We weren't. God wasn't. And you can make the argument. One of the things we take away from Tisha B'Av is that even though we had this terrible destruction, that it didn't take away our belief in God, it didn't take away our ability to connect with God, and that at a certain point, it kind of made us a people without a religious center anymore, but not without a way to worship. I don't want to jump the gun because that's what we talk about after the destruction. First, we prepare ourselves for the destruction and we recognize what we lost. So as it turns out, this is a perfect way to end right before Tisha B'Av. I couldn't have found a better way to end with this text, which tells us what happened when the temple was destroyed, which was that God said to Solomon, you screw up, I'm going to let this beautiful building be destroyed. And it never got rebuilt to the level that it was during Solomon's time.
People just tell a midrash that one of the reasons, and I forget which temple was destroyed, was people weren't being nice to each other.
Yes. So that's a beautiful thing to finish with too. Let me, I somehow at some point was going to mention that, but I forgot. And Judith just reminded me. It just said here, it's because they forsook. What are people going to be told when they look at the temple and the destruction of the temple? It's because they embrace other gods and worship them and serve them. And this is the midrash or the explanation the rabbis gave. The first temple was destroyed because the people were worshiping other gods. But they asked the question, but what about the second temple? The one that was destroyed by the Romans was the Jews were not rampantly worshiping Greek and Roman gods, just so you know. We know it, they know it. Did some Jews worship Greek gods? Sure. Roman gods? Yeah, we know that some of them did. I just told you that they were worshiping Mercury, they're offering up those sacrifices, but they weren't really worshiping other gods. I got news for you. Greeks and Romans weren't worshiping gods by that point, which is one of the reasons why Christianity was able to spread so fast. Is people said, yeah, these are stupid temples. There's no gods here. So they were right for believing in the Torah and in the Bible, and then eventually, again, for Christians in the message of Christianity. So Jews weren't worshiping other gods. Everybody knows that. The rabbis knew it. They couldn't say, God destroyed our temple again because we were worshiping other gods. They knew that was wrong. So they said, why was the temple actually destroyed in our time? Because we hated each other. Because we were fighting amongst each other. And they called it sinat chinam, baseless hatred, because we fought for no reasons against each other. And that's why they said the temple was destroyed, because we had zealots, we had Sicarii that were killing other Jews. We had Pharisees that were warring with Sadducees. We had priests that were warring with other priests. We killed ourselves. It was not the Romans that killed us. It was not the fact that we were worshiping Roman gods that destroyed us. It was because we destroyed ourselves. And that's why the second temple was destroyed. First temple of gods, worshiping other gods, but not the second temple, the Sinat Dinam, which is why some people say, again, when we're not worried about the theological reasons why we can meet catastrophe, it's those reasons. And again, that's one of the reasons why in Israel today, people say we have to make sure the third temple, which is the nation of Israel, the modern nation of Israel, which is not a building, but it's a country, that we don't be destroyed by the same thing. Sinat chinam, baseless hatred, always can exist. So they say, let's not devolve back into that. Or, people talk about other reasons why the third temple would be destroyed, but everybody comes up with what the third thing is, right? It's either the first one was idolatry, the second one was hatred of each other, civil war, if you will. The third one will be civil war again, which is what they say when people are really not getting along in Israel, or they'll say it'll be because we were not adherent for the mitzvot, or they'll say the third temple will be destroyed because we weren't taking care of our own national defense, or whatever, we weren't taking care of the poor. Whatever the reason is, they'll put that into this is the reason why the third temple got destroyed. So you'll hear that sometimes. You'll hear that discussion when people get very ominous and they get, very foreboding, and they want to warn people about how to behave better. But let's hope it never happens.
Is there a poetic sect, or has anyone ever used that to say that Israel is the third temple?
Yeah, I say it all the time.
But
No, Judith just asked. Yeah, I didn't make that up. I mean, there are people who say that, it started before Israel even existed, that the construction of Israel, the founding of Israel, was the third temple. Rav Kook said it. The first Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel said Israel itself is the third temple. Yeah, it's not I didn't invent. I believe that, and I also didn't invent that. That's something I subscribe to. That the third temple itself is the nation of Israel. There's not a building. It's not one building. There's the Knesset. There's every building in Israel to some extent is part of that third temple. Why not? It's a national exercise. It's an exercise of construction that your parents, my parents, and grandparents, and every generation of Jews in the last 100 years has sent money to Israel, just as our ancestors did with the Beit HaMikdash. There's no difference. Our intent, our prayers, our hatikva, everything else that we do is an extension of that third temple, which is why that's why I just got back from there, because I believe it's important for us to make a pilgrimage to that place and say, this is our third temple. Whatever a temple means to you, whatever the temple would have meant to our ancestors, to me, that's what Israel as a whole means to me. So that's why it's an important, it's important. That's why to me, it's the holy place, because it's not just one building. But I definitely feel Jerusalem is more of that than other places. But and we were not in Jerusalem a lot on this trip ourselves, Tracy and I, but there was no way we were going to Israel and not go to Jerusalem. So we went there, we went to the wall. It was very emotional because I hadn't been there in 5 years. And it was emotional being there. So I hadn't been there since my parents both died. The last time I was there was with my mom 4 weeks before she died. So it was very emotional just being in Jerusalem, being in Israel. But yeah, that's why we're going back in February, folks. So anyway, some of you will be there. All of you will be in our minds when we're there. And we will see you next week, if not before, Friday night with Wendy, where we're going to do some songs for Tisha B'Av. So I will tell you, it will be part of the service without being too depressing, because you're not supposed to fast on Shabbat, but you are supposed to be in this frame of mind during Av, the first week of Av, of thinking about what we've lost, so that we can celebrate what we have. By the way, it's not just to be a downer; it's to recognize that if you don't appreciate what it was like to lose it, you don't have that again. You won't have that same feeling of how lucky we are, how grateful we are to live at a time when it's been rebuilt. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rosemary, for reading for us, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good week.